Well, I found him.
You found him.
Yes, I found, as far as I know, the only other BYOC charging company in the US. There may be more, but this is the only other one I'm aware of, and I found him.
It's exciting. This is what you want the future to be, Ed, isn't it?
Yes,
It is only BYOC. And you are on a one-man mission to make this happen.
yes, indeed.
So we've got a cool interview set up. We will get to that in just a minute. But right now, I want to sell a t-shirt. Or many t-shirts if we could do that. So go to thewalkcar.com/store. We've got merchandising there. You could buy t-shirts, you could buy hats, you could buy a water bottle, a
Yep.
backpack.
Yeah,
What else have I put up there? We got fancy shirts. We got other stuff.
all
Head
sorts of
there.
stuff.
All of that helps. It helps fund the podcast and the blog, which I think I've said it before. It's not expensive to do this, but it's not free either.
Nope.
So all of that helps. And what do you get for that? You get me and my smiling face. If you go to our YouTube channel, which is like at the What Car, I think, and uh, you get to see me. And I guess you can't see my 20 years of experience doing all of this, but it's there, you know, behind the fancy glasses and
And
the
who are
bad
you?
haircut. Oh, did I not introduce myself? I'm Phil Royle. All right. We'll go on to you. It's been a week since I've done this.
Ed Sanchez, likewise 20 plus years in automotive content creation and moderation. Day job, automotive electronics industry analyst, and a co-founder and co-host of the Watt Car blog and podcast. And I'd like today's guest to introduce himself, and we're just going to jump into what I hope will be a fun and informative conversation.
Yeah, so my name is Josh Charles. I am the co-founder of Coul Street. We're basically on a mission to bring charging everywhere, and primarily we're starting with the street. So this is
Taking it to
where,
the streets, as the song says.
yeah, this is correct. This is where Ed and I have a lot in common. And actually, I've been following you guys for, I think it's about 3 years. Ed, you wrote an
Wow.
article on BYOC way back in 21, I think it was. And I stumbled across it and really started looking into you guys and been a fan ever since.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah, that's who I am.
Cool. Well, so start us at day one then with Cool Street. Like, um,
What was the light bulb moment that
yeah,
was like,
what and then
we
what
need to
is
do
it?
this?
Yep. Walk
Yeah.
us through the elevator pitch, but
Backstory.
with a
A,
backstory
a
attached to
long
it.
elevator. Yeah.
Yes, a long elevator. Like we broke down mid-floor.
Yeah, well, the pitch is we're bringing charging to people who park on the street, and it was, I believe it was 2018. It's long before I had an EV, but I'm watching all you folks out in California getting EVs, and I'm realizing this is coming. We're all going to be driving EVs, and EVs can't really be fueled effectively like you can a gas car. You can't roll
Mhm.
up to your DC fast charger every day and fill those things up. So I've lived in these moderate to small towns for a fair portion of my life and realized that we all park on the street and that's where we should be charging. So thought about this idea for quite a few years. Kind of came up with a solution of Coul Street in my head, which was why can't people just put chargers out on their own and then sell power to other people as other people want to use it? So that's the basic premise is deployable charging from people's houses that they deploy on their own and then that they can sell that power to other people. Uh, it was really a few years later. I sat on this idea for a while and was kind of reluctant to jump in, but eventually kind of got forced into it. I moved to a house where I have street parking and also ran it by a few people and they got super excited about the idea. So I was like, okay, I think there's something here. Started building a prototype before I had my EV, and my WRX actually blew a valve on the exhaust valve a couple months before I had that prototype done. So I bought my Chevy Bolt, and it all kind of kind of meshed together right there. So that's really where it came from, is out of necessity, and then realizing that this went way beyond me, and it was something I couldn't just sit on. It had to go to more people. But yeah, the concept is out. Getting charging out there. People can put it out on their own. Obviously with permits and things as the city allows, and we work with them on that. But then having the ability of a network to be able to sell that power to other folks as well.
hmm I'm I'm kind of curious about something. I know a lot of people, especially in like the green energy space more broadly, they go in with a lot of idealism and kind of the term we use around here is rainbows and unicorns kind of, you know, mentality about things. And then once they really get into it, they're like, wow, this is a lot more complicated than I thought it was. I'm wondering if you kind of got to a point, and I'm just making assumptions. This might not be the case, but yeah, either from a regulatory standpoint or just permitting or anything else, it was kind of a Pandora's box. And like, you're like, wow, there are a lot of moving parts to this. And like how you navigated that, how, what you found were like good resources. If you had any like mentors or people that said, hey, you know, maybe look at this or.
Mhm. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of challenges, and I knew that going in. That was part of my reluctance to actually jump into the space. I'm an engineer. I'm not, I can go into the technical stuff all day
Mhm,
long, but I realized that the real challenge here isn't necessarily the technical, although there is plenty of that, and
mhm,
especially we'll probably get into it with the BYOC. Yeah, on the regulatory front, it's actually been surprisingly um, I think we're hitting the market at a really good time where folks are receptive to it. So when we approach a city, we've actually found that they're pretty receptive to this sort of thing, especially over the past couple of years, since
mhm,
probably the 2020 timeframe when EVs have really hit the mainstream. A lot of these smaller cities, they don't have the resources to put chargers out there, maybe.
mhm,
And with us coming in and saying, "Hey, we have a solution," it's not really putting anything on your books. This is basically, it's a permitting thing. You have to allow it. You have to, be open to doing it.
mhm,
But that's been surprisingly easy to get those conversations going. We are working with a couple cities right now on that with some folks, and we typically have it be customer driven or potential customer driven, where
mhm,
somebody approaches us and says, "Hey, we're interested in this," and then we will work with the city on their behalf.
mhm,
But yeah, it's definitely challenging, and we know um, there's going to be some constraints there into the future
mhm.
as we go forward. But we think it's definitely solvable.
So have most of your inquiries been individuals or cities or like communities or.
Yeah, it's mainly individuals.
Mhm,
There's definitely some electricians who've been quite interested
mm,
in offering this to people. We think that's a really interesting avenue. There's
mhm,
a lot of people in the multifamily space. So we are, it's in our name, street. So
mhm,
we're going after street. But we also are really looking at other markets too. So we think
mhm,
it's really well suited to multifamily as well as like condominiums, things like that, where you have there the power is not necessarily from the individual. It might be from the condominium or the HOA or whoever's
domain. Yeah.
uh, putting that out there for the
Mhm,
people who live there. So, and we actually like that. We want to sell a lot there. We think that's an
mhm,
easier market to actually crack than the street. So it's a way for us to kind of enhance our business without doing strictly street.
mhm,
So to get a visual here
Mhm.
before we carry on, what is it? Uh,
Oh,
like people watching the video, behind you there's a little like monolith type thing that's sitting
yes.
there. Kind of walk me through. Somebody drives up. What are they looking for, and how do they interact? How do they function with the device?
Correct. So it's still somewhat in flux, and we'll get into where we're at timeline wise here. But yeah, essentially, this is a 3 foot tall metal post, and within the post is a socket. So there's actually a little, sorry for everybody who can't see, but there's a little door on the front of the post, and there's a socket behind that. This is a plug for the YouTube channel. You can go check it out. Um,
which is excellent, by the way. I've watched a lot of your videos. They're really informative and fun. Anyway.
I'm at your YouTube channel. You can
Oh.
come watch us doing this. But
Either way,
anyways,
people should
yeah.
watch all the YouTube channels.
So it's very simple. It's just a socket on a post along the curb. And essentially, folks will roll up. They will have a cord in the trunk of their car. that plugs into that socket. So this is an older prototype here. This is actually J1772. This is some of our earlier prototypes were this way, where you had a cord that you would plug into there, and then that cord plugs into the vehicle. So it's a true BYOC. There's no charging elements in the cord. It's a dumb cord. The charger is in the post itself. The way you interact with that is a few ways. One is you enable a charge using your phone, either through a QR code, or you locate the charger, kind of like you would do. Well, I do it with Tesla now. I charge on the superchargers, and I have to put in the number of the unit. You could do it that way, or through a QR code. But ideally, you use like a chipped cord.
RFID or yeah.
Yeah, RFID on the cord, or a card or something like that. That's the best way. And then eventually in the future, it will all be plug and charge through the standards.
Mhm.
So we don't want people in their phone if we can avoid it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's always been that's my pet peeve is like it should just work.
Mhm.
Yes.
The idea that, when I drove my first EV and had to go charge it, and I'm like on the phone to Ed. Like,
What do I do?
yeah, what do I need to download? And then I've got to like prepay
Yeah,
things, and I'm just there like,
that's a pain.
I
Yeah.
just want to charge. I just like, if you're not going to accept a credit card, you should just work.
Yeah.
There's two
So
ways this should go.
getting back to your YouTube channel, which is I mean, I have a bookmark, but off the top of my head, I can't remember the
It,
exact
it's just my name. It's Josh Charles.
okay, at Josh Charles.
No, it's at Charge Everywhere.
Nice.
Yeah.
Um so what I really appreciate about your videos is how candid they are, and like all of the experiences, the R&D headaches, the trials and tribulations, so to speak. And being an engineer, what would you say were the biggest like sacred cows in terms of like mentality or assumptions that you went into that were proven wrong, or things you thought, oh, for sure this is going to work, this is perfect, and it didn't, or something you thought, oh, this isn't going to work, and it did work. Um,
Hmm.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Engineers like to talk about simplicity a lot.
Uh-huh.
This is a constant battle of mine. Is we need to simplify as we go forward. BYOC was not our original concept. The
Hmm.
original concept was a retractable cord reel under the
Hmm.
ground, and I actually kind of started the company with that concept,
Hmm.
and very quickly realized that this was going to be way too expensive. You have lots of electrical stuff underground with water. That's not a great idea. And kind of that's what forced us into the BYOC.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of the things, I'm not sure there's been too, well, there is a lot of things that we struggle with
Hmm.
in certain areas. One that's been particularly challenging is the locking mechanisms. And you don't hear many people talk about this. But with the detachable cord standards that they use in
Hmm.
Europe, so the Mennekes Type 2 connectors, the cables lock onto the unit.
Hmm.
uh, we actually didn't do that on our initial prototypes. It was easier, and I was also
Hmm.
very skeptical of that because I saw a lot of things out of Europe where people were modifying their cables so they no longer locked. They wouldn't always detach, and people would
Hmm.
have their cords stuck, their personal cords stuck on a public charger. And I was like, yeah, that's not a good idea.
Yeah, that'd be a
Hmm.
bummer.
Yeah.
So I was kind of skeptical of that, and I was fighting that for a while, and eventually I kind of had to give in. But it has been very challenging because what ends up happening is locks are very large and clunky and ugly. Um, and you end
Add
up with some
complexity. Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of complexity there with that mechanical electrical interface. So we have some interesting solutions that are kind of different from what other people have done, but that's definitely proven to be more of a challenge than people really think about,
Hmm.
especially when you're trying to make something simple and robust that always works, always
Hmm.
unlocks. These are key things for us is we want this to last.
Yeah. Another thing I noticed, and I don't know how finalized this is in terms of product development, but
Mhm.
at some point you moved some of the electronics from the post into the building. And I'm wondering if that's a model you're going to continue to use going forward, or, and again, I don't know if this would even apply in this case, but I know some companies like to pot their circuit boards and electronics in urethane. They seem to think that makes it
Mhm.
more reliable. I don't know if I'm sure you've tried a lot of different things, but um, how you came to that place, that conclusion, like, okay, this is a better idea.
Yeah. Speaking of sacred cows, that probably is the big one. I fought that for a long time.
Hmm.
And actually, this unit here still has the electronics in about that top foot of the post.
Hmm.
And you can do it with the moisture sealing. You don't need anything too fancy as long as
Hmm.
your box is sealed up, just like a regular level 2 unit would be.
Hmm.
You're good to go. What drove us to move it out of the post was primarily safety.
Hmm.
So cities were concerned with this being hit, and when you relay in the post, your live wires go to the post, and so
Hmm.
that means you need to have other additional more equipment in there to disconnect that safely if it gets hit. By taking it out of the post, that's no longer an issue. Basically, it's relayed in the house or the building, so you don't have that issue. We also don't need a cellular chip. We can go to Wi-Fi because our Wi-Fi signals will reach where we need to go. And then, we don't have to worry about weather as much either. So that's kind of a side benefit. So
Hmm.
yeah, there's multiple benefits to doing that. I fought it for, it's easier to install this way. That was a big thing, but
Having
eventually I
everything
relented.
kind of self-contained in the,
Correct. Yeah. I mean,
gotcha.
it's super easy. You just
Hmm.
run regular conduit, regular wire right up into your connected in, and you're good to go.
Hmm.
It's a pretty simple install.
Hmm.
So with that, now you've you've got this. Who you'd mentioned if somebody contacts you and then you help them work through the permitting process and things like that.
Mhm.
Who owns the unit? Who's paying for the electricity? Who owns it? Who services it? The logistical end of that.
Correct.
Yeah, nuts and bolts. Yeah.
Yeah, this is where we differ from some other companies out there. And we do not own the unit. The unit is owned by the homeowner or the landlord or whoever puts this out there. Um, we think this is important. Uh, Reason being, if you have really low EV penetration in your area. So I know out in California, it's a whole different ball game, but the
Hmm.
rest of us in the US, there's a Tesla a block and a half away from me, but that's kind of it in my neighborhood.
Hmm.
So if I wanted a charger out there with a charge point operator, it would not make financial sense for them to do that. They're not going to make enough money off of me unless they charge me, I don't know, $1 a kilowatt hour or something like that, something crazy. So there's a value though in having that charging as a driver, obviously. So we think that allowing people to buy it and get it out there on their own, there is more upfront original cost, but it allows them to do that today. And then over time, as more and more people get it, you kind of build out a network naturally of all these units, probably in a close knit area. I get a lot of questions from people asking about it. Once you see one, you're like, oh, what's that? And it kind
Hmm.
of opens it up to more people wanting them, and it builds out naturally to the point where you start to solve some interesting problems like parking or availability, and all these things eventually sort themselves out in that way.
Hmm.
So these
So,
then they
yeah.
mount in the parkway if you've got a parkway or
Could be on the
presumably
sidewalk.
yeah,
Yeah.
a sidewalk. And then if you're moving the electronics in, like I assume that there's not just the mounting of this and then the connecting it to an electrical line, but is it more complicated to put the electronics inside or is it basically not much different?
It's slightly more complicated. Um, and that's just because you have to run both your power lines out as well as some communication lines. And there are ways to do that safely, but it is a little bit more wiring. But otherwise, no, it's not that much more complicated.
And then does the homeowner or building owner, are they setting the rates? And do you have like a
Correct.
suggested amount? Because I mean, electricity costs different, if they've got solar on the
I
building, or if they've got, like where I am, it's cheaper in some cases where I am to go to a level 3 charger than charge
mhm,
at home, depending on what hour it
yeah.
is. It's craziness where I am.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you start having, especially when you get into the like demand charges, that's where it gets
Mhm.
really tricky. Time of use is a little easier to deal with. We can just put in like, okay, from these hours, this is the rate that's charged on this electricity that's distributed. Uh, Demand is a little bit harder because then you kind of almost would have to look at the whole house. We haven't worked through all the details on how we do that yet. Um, but yeah, well, what were you gonna say?
No, I wanted to jump in and I apologize if we're jumping ahead something that we were going to address anyway, but I have had some particular experiences with a certain charging network who will remain nameless, but they are a fairly prominent name in the industry in terms of their stations being either in disrepair or inoperable. And because of their business structure, it always seemed like there were just different parties pointing fingers at one another, saying, "Oh, well, it's their response. No, it's their responsibility." And like, "Oh, well, they should have called it in." And it's like, I just want it to work. As an EV owner, you want to plug in and you want to charge. Who owns it? Who maintains it? Who services it? It's like, I just want it to work. So I guess I could see there are advantages to these units being privately owned, but from a standpoint of service, warranty, maintenance, I'm wondering how you've kind of brainstorm that and kind of what your approach is to that and going forward.
Yeah, I'm actually glad you asked that question. I know that company, and their name used to be similar to ours. Uh, if you go way back in the day. So yes, for individual homeowners, we don't think this is an issue. If your charger is broken at your home,
Hmm.
you're going to fix it.
Hmm.
Maintenance isn't a concern there. And we think that's actually one strength of this is the people who are most invested in the charger are the people who are most likely the ones using it most of the
Hmm.
time. When we get to say municipal or apartment complexes who are deploying multiple units, in those cases, we want to be more careful in how we do this with them. Meaning, there may be some extra kind of required service plans or maintenance plans that are
Hmm.
integrated with that to avoid that issue. It is a thorny issue. We don't want to be a charge point operator. We want to enable people to be
Hmm.
charge point operators, but we want to do it responsibly in a way where if our name's on it, because our name will be on it in some form or another, whether it's the app or wherever, um, that's not kicked back to us. It's we're
Hmm.
taking care of it in those cases. So that's the current approach we're looking at. We'll see how that works. There may be some challenges going forward, and we'll learn and adapt from that. But yeah, we want to avoid that.
So you mentioned a lot of electricians have expressed interest in this. I mean, so
Mhm.
is the general idea um, that you would basically have regional distributors that work with you, like on your website? Let's say you're in Wyoming. You're like, oh, I want one of these. It says find an installer near me. Da da da. Oh, Joe's Electrical and Casper. They do these. Okay,
Yeah, that's the ideal scenario.
okay.
Yeah. Um, we're not going to be the installers
Mhm.
as of right now, but we want them to be, yeah, approved. Put it that
So as part of that, and again, I know a lot of this is probably hypothetical at this point, but in terms of training, um, just like kind of a video tutorial or um, you know, maybe go out if you have like a critical mass of interest in the area, you and Tristan go out and basically have a workshop for, you know, installers and say, this is what to look for. Here's some troubleshooting tips. This tip makes installation easier. If you get a complaint about this, it's probably this, you know.
Yeah, so the installation, let me start that over. Sorry. this will get
I'll
chopped out.
I'll take a sip of water myself.
um, so the installation itself is very straightforward. It's nothing that is unusual from, say, a normal level 2 charger. Uh, yes, there is some trenching involved and some things like that that might involve. We're working on an install right now where we have 10 foot of sidewalk, and it's like, oh, we got to cut that out. So it's like, okay, a concrete person is involved here. But that's very easy. That could be a video tutorial or something like that. The bits that are trickier have to do more with the regulatory side of things and how that electrician can approach the city. And this is where we want to develop the framework to do that by basically, as we build out that experience, working with some direct contact with these cities, we can develop that framework and kind of hand it off to folks and say, hey, this is the best practices. This is what has worked in all these other locations, and run it through that way, because that is definitely the big challenge there, not the wiring.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So, I'm very much a logistics, like I'm a simple guy. So I'm going to go back and ask a simple question here. So you pull up, you've got your Coul Street bollard, or do you have a name for the unit?
We just
You're
call that
giving
the
away your
post.
heritage, Phil. I think ballard is
Yeah.
a British
Yeah,
term.
but bollard's fine.
So you pull up, and now I got to bridge that gap between my car and this thing. How do I get the C in the BYOC? Where's the cable? How do I attain a cable? How does that, just the logistics of that, come about?
So you get a cable with the charger, and you can purchase additional cables if you want additional cables. Yeah, this is always the interesting question, and
Mhm.
we don't think this is a problem for residential charging at all. And the reason for that is, at least in a low density situation, we're not going after, say, Manhattan or downtown LA right now. We're looking at kind of a medium density style city.
Kind of suburb.
There's like 16,000 cities that lie somewhere between 10,000 and 500,000 people. And so that's a really nice range. And there's tons of street parking. Cars are super important in those cities. People will be driving cars there for a long, long time. And so when you purchase it, you get the cable. And so the folks who need to charge will have cables. Where this doesn't work too well today is parking meters downtown.
Mhm.
I hope we get there within the next decade or two. And I hope BYOC is so popular that everybody has one of these cables in their trunk and we can just put sockets everywhere. That's the future we want. But for now, having it in locations where people always use that so they have the cable, we think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think if you end up having them on a city street and somebody's driving along and they park and then they see this, they'll recognize kind of what it is, that it's a charger if they've got an EV. If they don't have an EV, they're not going to probably even acknowledge this thing. But if they do, they would see it and they would recognize it. Then if there's the QR code on the side, they may not be able to charge now, but they could potentially see what it's all about and then order a cable if that's something that you offer, or if you point them in the direction of getting a cable.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So I could see the adoption being slow on that side, but also completely possible, because like people like Ed are always into buying more cables, buying more stuff, and so if he could get
Like
another
front
cable,
full of adapters. Yeah.
yeah.
I wish I had a front to fill up. I don't. Mine are in the trunk, but
So, what's kind of interesting about this is, I don't know how you feel about mentioning them by name, but the other prominent BYOC company in the US, they said their vision was that ultimately automakers would provide BYOC cord with the purchase of the vehicle. So
Mhm.
just like how not all, I mean, Tesla used to do this, they quit doing it. A lot of EVs are sold with basically a level 1 charger with the vehicle. And they're saying, well, we kind of foresee this the same way, that as in the trunk or in the little goodie bag or whatever, there will be either level 1 or kind of a BYOC cable. It'll be included in the purchase price, and um, So I'm wondering if you think that's kind of far-fetched or you see that happening. Um, and I have another question I'll get to later, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
No, that I don't think that's far-fetched at all. In fact, it's my understanding the Europeans already do that.
Hmm.
And it was kind of funny. I had a conversation with a guy in the Netherlands once, and we were talking about this, and he basically was shocked that we didn't take the cables off our chargers. And I was like, no, we would find it very strange that you guys do.
Yeah.
And but to his point, he said they just come with the car.
Hmm.
And that's really the world I want to see. I guess, Ed, you're the guy out there pushing for this. I put myself
Hmm.
in that group. I just want to see BYOC really take off, and everybody just has cords, and then there's just sockets everywhere
Hmm.
in a post on a wall. Actually, I have the post here, but
Hmm.
we're also developing this just as a kind of standalone socket that can go on
Oh, okay.
just in like a dual gang outlet box. So you can put
Hmm.
this on a wall in a parking garage, in a post, and then that way it can be applied almost anywhere.
So that would basically be like a female type 2 socket.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Um, so well, I wanted to jump ahead, but kind of getting back to that because you said originally in the original concept, you had the J1772, um, and you said no, we're going to the Menike's Type 2. What was there? Was that regulatory pressure? Was that just kind of industry momentum? Um, Technical reasons? I mean, you know, ISO standards or SAE recommendations. What kind of convinced you to make the switch?
The short answer is the SAE recommendations.
Gotcha.
The long answer, NACS.
Hmm.
Um, when when Ford and then GM adopted NACS,
Hmm.
I realized, okay, J1772 is dead,
Hmm.
and we
And then
need
the
to.
domino effect after that, basically everybody else.
Right.
Yeah.
I was watching it when Ford did it, and then I was like, okay, if GM goes, I know it's dead. We're doing something different here.
Yeah.
And so as soon as GM went, I was like, okay, we got to change. And so we started looking at NACS. Um, I like NACS. NACS is nice. But yeah, then the SAE with their 3400 standard is kind of proposing Type 2. And the other, well, it's electric, the other company.
Well, same. Nathan, we love you. Tia.
Yes, I'm also a big fan of them. I've been following them
Yeah.
for a long time too. So yeah, they're using Type 2 as well.
Hmm.
Ultimately, we want all the companies to use the same thing. We don't want to be competing over a plug standard because then
Hmm.
nobody will be able to use their interoperable cords between vendors. So
Hmm.
um, yeah, ultimately we need to settle on something. I'm still not a fan of Type 2. I think the North American market should go with NACS.
Hmm.
Um, there's several
On both
reasons
the
for that.
post and the car side. Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. There's not a technical reason you can't.
Hmm.
And you have several advantages with NACS over Type 2.
Hmm.
This is the
So,
weird thing about
mm,
this whole industry is like we're the idea of it of a cable coming with the car is weird now, but the we're so new in the EV space
mhm,
that
especially
it's
North
weird.
America.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in North America, that
Mhm.
it sounds weird to people who are in this like little bubble right now, but fast forward 5 years, and that's a significant percentage of the amount of the lifespan of EVs. Like
Hmm.
it's not like you're suddenly saying to like a gas powered car, well, you now fuel up on the roof or something. That would be a complete shift where it involves
Yeah.
ladders and all sorts of stuff. Like this is you fast forward 5 years and there's going to be huge percentages of people who that's their first time driving any of this. And so to
Hmm.
them, when they buy it and it's got this cable, it's just the way
It's
it
just
is.
normal. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
So there's the opportunity right now to set all of that. And what I like as well with using a similar system as It's Electric is the thing that I think has just done no good to the EV world is these like plug battles. It's
Hmm.
like you get something and then like you see a leaf and you're like, but I can't really charge it. It's like you it doesn't really work. So, well, I don't really want to get that. And then like if I've got somebody who's like, should I buy an EV now? In fact, I said this a couple months ago to one of my friends and they ended up leasing. Like if you're gonna get an EV right now before NACS is everywhere, lease it. Don't
Mhm.
make this your problem in the long
Mhm.
term if you're going to keep the car as they do for 10,
Yeah.
15 years.
Mhm.
Because we're in the middle of the plug wars.
Mhm.
And I guess we're at the end of
Well,
the
the
plug wars.
well, the battle's
And
been won. It's just the
yes,
transition.
yeah, it's the
It-
transition of
yeah.
the
Yeah.
after
Yeah.
effect of this. So I really like, regardless of what you end up with, pick something.
Yeah.
Well, it's not strictly in our hands. Right now there's two of us. I know there's going to be several more, and that's a good thing. I think, you know, BYOC is, to your point, that's what it should be,
Mhm.
for public level too. And yeah, so we'll see. I do anticipate there might be a little bit of a plug war on the socket for a bit, but hopefully that gets sorted out quickly. Um, yeah.
So,
Oh, actually, quick
or what?
question there. What if it does change and it goes to NACS on the plug side? Is it
Mhm.
a simple swap out on your units?
The
Or
post
is
It,
it
cycle.
like,
it's
is it major facelift is it like huge problem?
uh no, they're pretty comparable. I actually have prototypes of both,
Oh,
so
well, there you
yeah,
go.
it's not.
Yeah. I mean, the form factor of NACS is much smaller than pretty much anything. So whether you compare that to Type 2 or CCS or anything, it's just like, I don't have it with me, it's in my car, but um, we, and this was before we were started to do video, but I got the Tesla CCS to NACS adapter. The CCS side is like humongous, and the next side is tiny. So yeah, I mean, definitely from a packaging standpoint, it probably has advantages.
Yeah,
Anyway,
that looks pretty fragile. I just got the other way. I just got Nax to CCS,
uh,
and that at least looks more proportional than the one you're
yeah,
referring to.
Yeah, Ed's looks like it's either like a self-defense weapon or it's bizarre. It looks like it just snap right off. Like the leverage of it, it's
yeah,
weird.
I always use it very carefully when I use it. Um, so I'm curious about one thing. How much of a catalyst was the Nevi program to what you were doing, if at all, or was it kind of a non-event for
Yeah,
what you were
it's
doing?
so far it hasn't really been an event of much significance.
Hmm.
It's only been recently that Nevi has started looking into the level two arena.
Hmm.
The first few
Hmm.
funding rounds here have all been level three or DC fast charging, and even then, it's pretty much geared towards charge point operators,
Okay.
which rules out kind of where we're sitting because that's
Hmm.
not us. So yeah, it hasn't been of much significance to us so far.
Have you done any outreach or overtures toward the DOE, like, hey, can we maybe get in on this? Or are you, I mean, considering the season we're in and what the world might be like in a few weeks, are
Hmm.
you just going to kind of sit on the sidelines and kind of wait and see? I mean, I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that
Yeah,
without
we're
getting
kind of
overtly
taking a
political, but
yeah, we're taking a little. We're not too concerned about that, but
yeah.
the it will be what it will be. Um, and we think that EVs are coming regardless of what the
Hmm.
political situation, fleshes out to be. I think we've seen that continued to
Hmm.
progress over the past few administrations. Uh, no, with the DOE, we've had a few interactions with them over the years, but at this point, we're kind of focused on getting a product out there,
Hmm.
and then yeah, then we will begin seeing if there's opportunities for that. We do not think that our approach needs government funding to do it. We don't want to do
Hmm.
it based on grants. They will
Hmm.
be very helpful
Hmm.
for having a tax rebate on installing a charger, for
Hmm.
instance. That's something that our users can take advantage of in the
Hmm.
installs, and we want to help them with that. But
So more in terms of policy than regulation, because I mean, to your
yeah,
point, once government gets involved in something, it gets more expensive, more complicated, takes longer. I mean, Not to be partisan about it, but that's just seems to be the general consensus. But
Yeah, we're really shooting from bottom up,
mhm,
and you know, trying to come in from the bottom. We're not driving top down,
mhm,
which is
mhm,
why we're going to the customers and kind of driving up that way to the cities. And the cities are really the gatekeepers on this. It's
mhm,
not, the federal government or the state government. Each city has their own electric code. They have their own parking authority. They have their own, regulations on the permitting for encroachment permits or whatever's needed there. And then you also have the residents. So the residents are
mhm,
like, NIMBYism or whatever,
mhm.
that plays a part too. So every situation is a little different.
So
Yeah,
I mean that kind of
I
yeah.
imagine there's with cities, like the city I'm in is very electric friendly. I mean, California, they're all going to be electric friendly, but like my city's got rid I believe we're all electric buses at this point. They're replacing the school buses with electric buses. One of my kids' schools is has got massive Tesla Powerwall. Like they are very, if I went to the city and I said I want to put this up on the parkway, I imagine they would say, I never heard of this. Let me look into it, and we'll make this happen.
Mhm.
They're very
Mhm.
forward thinking there. So I imagine there's going to be a number of cities where that's a lot easier of a process. That there's going to be some that are very welcoming that might even like go in and hold hands and be like, oh, let's
Yeah.
there's this,
Mhm.
these state benefits, and we could get you in on these.
Right, right.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the light bulb that just went off is even though you individually might not directly benefit from NEVI, you could potentially indirectly because if cities or municipalities are get funding from that and they want to do something with it, then they could approach you and say, "Hey, we got this federal grant
Mhm.
or the state grant, we want to do something."
Correct. Yeah, and that's the approach. That would be the approach we take if we go down that route. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So, um, scary question. Say this thing just like boom takes off,
Mhm.
and you suddenly start getting all these calls because, of course, you're on this podcast, and everybody, uh, everybody, this is the catalyst. How fast can you scale this? I mean, I assume it's early days that that you've got a few out there that you're testing, that this is where you are in that process. Uh, is it like you could? What's your manufacturing like? I guess is it you in the garage and you're cobbling these
Your
together as
welder.
fast as you can, or is it that you could actually scale these things up? I know not to say the walkout.com/store, but there, like if you don't know how many you're going to sell of something, there's certain ways that you do things where you're not as profitable with it, but it's an easier thing to scale. Then once you start seeing what numbers you're getting, then you can go a different way with production of stuff, and you can
Mhm.
make more profit, but it requires um, carrying more stock yourself and yada yada yada. I imagine it's the same thing, slightly different than a t-shirt on your case. But how's that process kind of look if all of a sudden you it starts taking off more than you imagine and faster than you imagine?
Well, that's a problem we would like. I'll say that. um, and so I don't necessarily have a super concrete answer today on what
Mhm.
that looks like if we get beyond our, where we're at manufacturing wise. I will say we're setting things up to scale well. So whether we're at, tens, hundreds of units up into the thousands, there's probably not a huge difference in how they're made. Um, we are doing, most of the assembly, the final assembly here. There is stuff that will be done internationally, probably some domestically, components coming in. But it's not necessarily, I could be totally out of line here and maybe it'll blow up in my face and we'll be super happy. But, you know, into the thousands of units we're pretty comfortable with. Um, the Yeah, definitely when you get into the tens, hundreds of thousands, you're at a different scale here. But
Mhm.
the market is so early, and the number of people, particularly in our sector, who have EVs and park on the street is very low. And we actually think this is why probably a lot of the big players have not looked at this market much to date. There's a few out there, but it's pretty scant. the number
Mhm.
of street charging options. And so we think that as it's something that there is a market there. There's definitely a market, but it's not a market that is already there. It's a market to be. Let me put it that way.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so we think we can build into that market as it takes
Mhm.
off. It's not like we're going to have a million people out there who already have EVs and they're like, oh, we need it today.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
I
I
could be
imagine
totally wrong, but
yeah.
that's
I imagine part of it's the quote that's always attributed to Henry Ford, and I don't think it actually was him. Or maybe I'm getting my quotes mixed up. If you ask people what they want, they'll when it comes to
Faster
cars, they'll tell
horse.
you a faster horse, and
Mhm.
then they come along with the car, and they're like, oh no, that's actually what I want. I imagine that's very much the problem here, that we are stuck in this uh, what we're used to. We're used to going to a destination, a gas station, to charge, and
Mhm.
people are just getting used to the idea of when they're buying their first EV, oh, I can charge at home? That works.
Mhm.
The idea then of going, I mean, that blew people's minds. Then the idea to say, well, you could, right next to somebody's house or on the parkway or next to I mean, it could even be incorporated into it, I imagine, a parking meter
Mhm.
that you can just pull out a cable and charge. Like, I
Or street
imagine,
light, or yeah.
yeah, I imagine that is it's almost a step too far for people to think of when
Yeah.
it comes to this thing that they're not used to. Like one of my friends who went and accidentally bought an EV. Like she didn't put any thought into this. She just thought the car was cool
Impulse
and she
purchase. Yeah.
test drove it and
Yeah.
was like, yeah, let's trade in my gas car and I'll get an EV. The idea that the different how flexible these things are, I guess,
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
I think it's wild. So
Yeah, it's really the beauty of electric. The infrastructure can be everywhere.
Mhm.
I got a book recently on gas pumps, gas stations,
Mhm.
the history of gas stations. It's fascinating. I need to get more books. And
books, they're the new thing. They're
yeah, more gas station books. I mean, but yeah, the early 1900s, a lot of gas pumps were on the curb, and we think about
Huh.
that now. Sorry, well, I'll finish that.
I had no idea that
Yeah, so early 1900s, a lot of gas pumps were on the curb, and obviously there's some huge problems there.
Mhm.
And they soon discovered that they get hit and blow up, and you know not a good place to have them. And they also had problems with queues forming,
Mhm.
lines of cars off of that and blocking the street cars and all kinds of stuff. So eventually they outlawed them. But electric doesn't have those problems, particularly if you're parked there overnight. There's no queue, and they're not going to blow up if you hit them. It's as I said, the power is only there if you're charging, and it's very safe. So yeah, electric has these really unique um, ways of being distributed that gasoline doesn't.
Yeah.
so now you we talked a little bit about scaling and whatnot. What is kind of your I guess not plan, what are you anticipating in the future? What's coming down the road? I always ask this question and I always preface it with I hate this question. Uh, you go forward 5 years, 10 years, whatever number you want to pick. How do you foresee the the development of the product, the deployment of the product, the growth of it? Is it going to be like a slow ramp, like EVs kind of slowly ramped, and then they just like, at least
Yeah.
in
Hockey
California, they
stick.
just
Yeah.
took off. Like
Mm-hmm.
it still blows me away. I had a friend that is from middle of America, took a vacation, went to San Francisco, and he said he got off the plane. He was like, it was like living in the future. Everything was electric here, and he's just seen like handfuls of EVs.
Mhm.
So, do you kind of anticipate this like ramp, or do you think it's just a slow little plod along and make progress?
I would imagine it will ramp slowly over the next couple of years. It depends on the area, and
Mhm.
then it will potentially explode. You'll hit a tipping point. You guys out there in California, you've probably already kind of hit that point. Um, for us here, I was in Vancouver a couple of weeks ago, and it was like, oh wow, there's a lot of EVs here. I've never seen so many non-Tesla EVs. Like
Yeah.
all we
Mhm.
have here is Teslas and some Bolts and some Mach-E's or something. occasional Cybertruck. But yeah, I think you'll hit a tipping point where it really takes off. And that's kind of what we need to be prepared for is that point. And I would expect it could hit sometime in the next 5 years, across, it'll be different areas at different times, but across the nation as a whole.
Mhm. Are you, and again, this is maybe a little cheeky and presumptuous to ask this, but would you be open to a partnership potentially with another company, either in the area of distribution, R&D, software? I mean, for all I know, you probably have had some conversations that you're not at liberty to discuss on this podcast with certain people, but I'm just wondering how you see that potentially, you know, figuring into your business plan and strategy.
Yeah, so definitely, uh, yes. The short answer is yes. And we have had a few conversations, here and there. The the thing we want to be mindful of, and I think I've mentioned this in a few videos, is we really want to do what's right for the customer.
Mhm.
I know when you get into larger corporations, things can be done for the wrong reasons,
Yeah.
with
Making
respect to the
quarterly
customers.
results or
Yeah,
whatever.
let
Yeah.
me put it that way. And so we need to be mindful in the way we take investment, who we partner with, the cost structures we set up. There's different things that, we've definitely, kind of tailored our business model and our plan around to accommodate what we think is going to be best for the users. And ultimately, as you get new users, that'll be adapted. But
Mhm.
that's, yeah. The short answer is yes. We want to do that. We think there's a lot of potential for win-win scenarios working with folks. Um, but yeah.
And it sounds like ultimately the way your business model is kind of set up for exactly that. Like if you got a partnership with some company and then you're like, here are the units. Like
Mhm.
Mhm.
here's our service, here's our recommendations, here's, what we do here. And then if somebody comes in and wants to buy 500 of them and, you know, brand them however they want to brand them or whatever, it seems like that's exactly
Correct.
how you're set up,
Correct.
which is, it only takes a couple partnerships before it just
Mhm.
like, it's, it,
Right. Yeah. I
That's
mean,
the
we would
hope.
call
Yeah.
it, white labeling or being an OEM producer, or even just enabling, people who want to kind of be a charge point operator,
Mhm.
using them. There's a few different scenarios there that we see.
Awesome. Well, I could go on for another hour with various questions, but I think what I'd rather do is save that for a future episode, and would like to have you back on. Maybe Tristan could join and kind of come an update on what's been going on, future deployments and partnerships. But I'm super jazzed. We finally got you on here, and we finally made this happen. And yeah,
Yeah. No, I was super excited when you reached out. Yeah, I was honored. Like I said, I've been following you forever, and it was like, oh, I want to do this.
nice.
so how do people find out more information?
Yeah, so you can go to our website. It's coulstreet.com. So just, well, it's on my hat, but if you can't see, coulst.com. And that's the best place. And the second best place would be my YouTube channel. So that's just my name, Josh Charles, or at Charge Everywhere.
Charging. Yeah.
Yeah, Charge Everywhere is the designation there. We're also on TikTok and Instagram a little bit, but a little bit less so there.
Yeah, my social strategy is to be everywhere, but largely ignore everywhere, and just concentrate on one or two. I mean, there's so many, so hard.
Yeah.
We got other things to do.
No, but I just want to
Totally.
encourage people to visit his YouTube channels because they're really informative. They take kind of complex engineering concepts and principles and really boil them down into an easy to understand. I'm not an engineer, but the way you explain things is like, oh, I get it now. Um, so yeah, if you're really curious about this, and if you are an engineer, he really gets into the weeds about some stuff, which I find fascinating. So yeah, for sure, check it out at Charge Everywhere and at Josh Charles.
Well, just Josh Charles is the
Yeah,
the name of the channel, and then yeah, Charge Everywhere is the the handle, I guess you call
Yeah.
it.
All right. Well,
Nice.
thank you very much.
Yeah,
Been
thank
a
you.
great conversation.
Look forward to having you back.
We will do that.